Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage in the beautiful state of Maine. Today it's mid-40s, a little bit windy, but the sun is out. Melting the giant snowstorm that they forecasted this weekend turned out to be about 3 inches of fluff. And I didn't even plow it. Most of it melted yesterday, and by the end of the week it's going to be 50s and 60s. I don't suspect there'll be any of it left. And I never turned a wheel on the tractor, so that's good, saving fuel. Today I realized, while doing my typical day of random stuff, jumping around from here to there, some days I'm focused just doing one thing, other days not so much. Keeps the day interesting, but I do not do a good job capturing it on film, and with my new iPhone 10, when I'm behind the camera, you'll hear it. The sound modulates up and down when my tone changes, so either I talk like this and don't make a whole lot of, ups and downs, or my normal modulation of my voice makes the phone go nuts. And that's just gonna be that way until I figure it out. If I put it on the selfie stick and hold it way away, then it's not so bad, but I apologize. Hopefully it's not too annoying. Well, if you listen to me talk, you're probably over that. I get a kick out of the people that comment about my accent. And I've said it before, I never knew I had an accent. And everybody I know talks pretty much like I do. It depends where you are. The person making that comment say, hey, nice accent, and they're laughing at you. They live in a part of the country that they sound a certain way. That's just the way it is. Or what part of the world you're from. Everybody sounds different. So here's a few random things that I did just today. On a beautiful fall day 4 or 5 years ago, if I thought about it, I could tell you the exact year, probably 2017. I dragged home this mill. I did some trading with my buddy Charlie, and acquiring this mill is one of the greatest things that have happened in my shop. I love this thing. But I knew nothing about making the three-phase power work and how to run it. This thing has a lot of knobs and wheels and switches. So first I expanded my electrical knowledge and got it working, converting the three-phase to single. Well, converting the single to three-phase, I should say. Secondly, I stumbled across Mr. Pete 222 here on YouTube. Tubal Cain, your YouTube shop teacher, he goes by. A school teacher by trade, plus a very talented machinist. With a very soothing voice. Occasionally I would fall asleep and wake up and have to rewatch the episode, but he taught me things. One of the first projects I did was to build this fly cutter. I used the insert from the lathe, the Dolores style tool post that I have, but I made the, this piece with to hold it. And I'm kind of proud of it because it works really well. I'm still learning how to use it and not to use it. I ran low RPM on this piece of bar stock today, so I don't throw chips halfway across the shop. That's one of the reasons why I haven't used it much. Today I decided to run it slow, and that actually worked out a lot better. Did not make a huge mess. I would use it again. This is going to be a header jig for a small block Chevy for my buddy Ken. I should have built it by now, like a year ago, but I'm getting to it today. I don't even have a good excuse for it, but hey, we're getting it done. I also, within the last year, received a gift of this 6-inch Kurt vise. Actually, it's in better shape than the one that's on the mill. But it was in pieces. It didn't have any jaws or any bolts. And the bearing here was all tore apart, but taking me a little while to collect the parts without spending too much money. But now we got brand new jaws in it. We got it working. I had a few handles. Now it's fully functional and ready to go. On this job, it might have been handy to hold the bar stock with 2 vices, but this worked out okay. When you install a vise onto the mill table, you have to do what's called tramming it, T-R-A-M, I believe, which makes it perfectly straight. Otherwise, everything you cut would be crooked. So Part of the process, I have a rig that I made that fits into the spindle, and you put a dial indicator in it, and you just run it across the jaws of the vise and adjust it and tighten the bolts till it's straight. Some things are right in plain sight, but if they weren't explained to you, you may not figure them out. For instance, these notches right here. That's how, if you tilt the head on the mill, you can quickly get it back close to level. You could adjust in there from a dial indicator, but most of the stuff you're going to do in this direction, this will be fine. Because most people, when they get the spindle straight up and down, they don't want to tilt the head to do any work like that because it's going to be too hard to get it back. In reality, this is easy. But if you didn't know that and many, many hundreds of other little nuances to the Bridgeport style machine that I still don't know. But I absorb them like a sponge. The gray drive shaft I built on this channel for my 72 Nova a year or so ago. But the black one I just did yesterday morning for a friend of mine. And he should be picking it up. Well, I assume today. He's building a 30s or 40s Dodge coupe of some sort. But oddly enough, it's the same length drive shaft as a Turbo LS Dart with a Power Glide and a 9-inch Ford. Here in the back room, I have started to pick through and spread out the parts for this 350. Belongs to a friend of mine. I think I told the story. It was for sale right up the street for cheap money. It has Brodex heads and stuff on it. He paid $700 or $800 for the whole motor. Had a spun rod bearing. He bought a new crank, had it balanced again. And I'm just going to poke it back together. But I'm still mad I didn't buy it. But I'm glad for him. Does that make any sense? I'm glad I have all these Turbo 400s on moving dollies because I move them often. Like, for instance, the engine was over there. I had to get to the other end of the room. That's my 47 Ford cab. And I don't know if I told you, but I picked up a Willys fiberglass tilt front end. So I'm going to be changing the looks of the cowl. All these old trucks, the cowls are pretty well shaped the same. I've already had the nose mocked up on there. It's going to require some work. Probably cutting it to match this groove so I can still have the vent, but it needs to be straight down here. I have all the fenders for this too, but I'm not a huge fan of the looks of the 47-ish Ford cab. It does look cooler because somebody's started chopping it. So lots more to come on this one. I'm going to build the frame jig. I already bought a couple of I-beams and I'm going to set it right up in this room and build a frame for it and a pickup box and everything else. I had a 8-foot metal brake just to make, pickup beds, but it was in the way all the time. I had an opportunity to sell it and I can just pay somebody to bend the bed sides. I love tools, don't get me wrong, especially metal shaping tools. But I had to call Uncle on that one because that 8-foot brake took up a lot of space. And it wasn't in that great a shape. And I believe I just said that backwards. I love the looks of this cab. I do not like the factory hood, fenders, and nose. I mean, they're okay. They're ugly, but sometimes ugly is cool. But that Willys front end is really cool. If you don't think your smartphone knows what's going on in your life, a buddy of mine sent me a message, asked me if I had a spindle sander. I said, nope. The next day, one pops up, suggested for me on Marketplace, about 10 miles away. And I bought it for cheap money. Comes with a few spindles. I haven't even tried it yet, but it looks pretty handy. I got this Autometer gauge kit from my buddy John in Missouri. Another enabler. And I thought briefly about putting in the 71 Nova, replacing the factory gauge cluster. But the fuel sender, it would be nice if they actually told you somewhere, and maybe they do. I looked at the fuel sender instructions. They never mentioned the ohm rating. Factory Nova is 0 to 90, I believe, and this is 33 to 240 with my cheap Harbor Freight meter I had sitting right here. But the 72 has no dash whatsoever. Might be a good candidate for it. Gauges themselves, if you run a Holley fuel injection system, you almost don't need the gauges, but I kind of like the look. The Holley dash, while expensive, will tell you everything you need to know. I love the packaging when you open it up, but getting it back together, it's kind of like getting brake shoes back in a box. I'm also excited to just dedicate maybe a week coming up soon to getting this cab painted enough that it can live outside. It's in nearly perfect shape. I'm gonna probably paint or spray undercoating or bed liner underneath and reacquaint it with the frame that's outside. It's a 49-ish Chevy. It's in really nice shape for the most part. The doors are missing. I got a set of doors, and those are the patch panels for them, for the bottoms. And I'll have to do that at some point too, but there's no reason I can't get the cab cleaned up on the frame and out of here. And it's also getting that time to start working on the interior of this. It just sits there pretty much ready to run. The headliner, I'm dreading it, so that's the major hold up. But I'll just embrace it one day and get after it. Excuse the wind noise if there is any, but this is the Willys front end that I carefully stored outside for the winter. I braced up the back of it, and it actually weathered quite nice. This is a frame for the 49. We were just looking at the cab. Inside, the bed is all original rustic and patina. It'd be kind of fun to paint the cab and nose and have it beautiful from the bed forward and have it total rat rod from there back. So who knows what I'll do. I went outside just now to measure the track width on both the Model A frame that I have out there and my 49 Chevy frame for the 49 pickup that we've looked at a couple times in this video already. Sidebar, if you think I'm crazy, suffer from an undiagnosed condition, you're wrong. What I am is happy. I love having different projects. If I had one vehicle, which I have most of my life, it's taken me a long time to acquire all this unfinished junk. And I don't care if they sit here for the next 20 or 30 years, it takes me that long to finish them. Because my brain is happy thinking about gathering parts and what fits what and what I'm going to do and trying to stick to a plan. But hey, plans change. If you're not honest with yourself, you're going to get upset when the plan changes, but that's just the way it is. Sometimes it circles back around and you realize you had the right idea to start with, but I wouldn't have it any other way. If all these projects were finished, I just need more projects. So I'm saving money by taking my time and working on them. And I'm working on them at a relatively decent pace. They get sidetracked, like sliding the 64 Dart in here and spending 6 months working on it. That was never in the plan 8 months ago. But it just happens. And at some point you're committed and you got to do something with it. And if I didn't have it, I'd be, every time I saw an old, Mopar for sale, I'm thinking, with no engine and transmission, hey, I'm going to LS swap that thing. I spent some time last night, speaking of the 64 Dart. I have pieces of a roll cage. I'm going to put a roll cage in it, 850 cert. I was shopping for them, and I'm on the JEG site, and I just put in 64 Dodge Dart roll cage, and there's about 20 pages of roll cages, and I'm going through every vehicle that I remember, and many I've forgotten. I mean, we're talking Fieros and Toyotas and Chevy Loves, and you name a vehicle, Triumph, a Gremlin. I found a roll cage for a Gremlin. I still hadn't found one for the 64 Dodge Dart. A-body Mopars don't exist below 1967. in most everything. The early 60s ones, they're just the redheaded stepchild nobody wants to talk about. And of course, that's the model I have. I popped over to the Summit website, typed in 64 Dodge Dart roll cage, and came up with the Rhodes race cars part number, put it back in JEGS, and there it was. If I'd gone through maybe 20 or 30 more pages on the JEGS website, maybe I would have found it. But it bothers me that they don't give any dimensions on roll cages. In the past, when Alston came out with a kit car chassis, they had small, intermediate, and large vehicle, and they fit really well. You got to believe that most of these roll cages, if you knew the bend charts for them, they're probably all the same. I have two main hoops for first gen Camaro, third gen Nova, which they list those roll cages separate. And it fits the Dart pretty well. I'm going to have to do some mods to get it to work, but that's just looking ahead to the future. But I find it odd that it was so hard to find on that particular site. But the reason I was measuring the track width to get back on track is I used my 57.5-inch 9-inch Ford that I had built a few years ago. I like to, if I'm going to build a rear end, I want to build it complete, have brakes and everything just like that one, ready to go when I find something to put it in. I've been studying for years. I was lucky to work in a transmission shop where I was underneath vehicles all day long, and we were still working. This is the early 80s. We were still working on the cool 70s and 60s cars. So I would study with a tape measure between that and the interchanging of transmission and driveline stuff I was doing to know what fits what. And you'd be surprised, there's not a lot of difference in the width of a rear end in all three makes, Ford, Dodge, and GM. Take GM, for instance. The difference between a 55 Chevy and a 75 Caprice Classic, 2 inches. Hard to believe, isn't it? All the vehicles in between, rear drive, anything that came with a V8 you can think of, Nova, Camaro, whatever, they go from 60 to 62 inches. And that's it. So, in reality, you can find it's only an inch per side. Most all the rear ends in the GM car line will interchange with each other. You can throw away the Impala and Caprice ones. Just stick with the Chevelle, Nova, Camaro stuff. We're talking an inch apart now, half inch aside. You'll probably never know the difference, depending on what wheel and how much tire you're trying to stuff under it. Sometimes, as we learned on the Dart, a half inch or 1 inch makes a big difference. But when you're running a stock size tire, it really doesn't. So I was watching TV last night, watching some racing. I was on the Speedway Motors garage sale site. It was 25% off the garage sale stuff. I bought a pair of Currie axles that would normally come in the 9-inch Ford bolt-in rear end kit for a 55 to 57 Chevy. That builds in stock form, a 60-inch wheel-to-wheel. That's the only dimension that I care about. Everything else is just going to confuse you, much like a drive shaft. Measure between the center and the U-joints. On a rear end, measure where the wheels mount. That's the easiest way to keep track of what's going on. A factory 55 to 57 Chevy would be 60 inches. The Currie kit builds a 59.5-inch rear. These axles shipped to my door were $240. 31 spline, aftermarket, 2-inch studs, 3-bolt patterns, the bearings, the retainers, everything. That's a serious markdown. That's a $500 or $600 set of axles. So I have several 9-inch Ford housings. These axles are set up for the Torino style, also known as New Big Ford housing end. I have 2 sets because I'm collecting stuff all the time, and I got my mental inventory going because I'm mental. And I'm going to build, I have a 9-inch Ford disc brake kit. I also have enough stuff to do drums, but I think I'm going to put that disc brake kit on this rear end so it'll technically fit a Tri-5 Chevy. I've been dealing with a friend of mine who has a 56 two-door wagon Chevy that I want. I don't have time for another project. I don't have money for another project. But I still want it. And if I can work a deal with him, we're in heavy negotiations at the moment. It may fall through. If he says no, he saved me a lot of money. If he says yes, welcome to another vehicle. But I can't go wrong building a 59.5-inch axle, because that'll fit the Nova with a, the 71 Nova that has a stock width rear end. It's not stock because I narrowed it to 59.5. The rear end under that is 59.5. It'll fit my 49 Chevy pickup. It's slightly too wide for Model A. They take a 57.5 to 58. But it's in the range of working for most anything, so I can't go wrong. Typically, I have everything to narrow the housing. We'll do that right here on this bench. I have all kinds of center sections. I already had the brake kit. The only thing I was missing was the axles, and that's a $500 or $600 item, so I was hesitant to just go ahead and randomly buy it, but for $240, I'm going to build another rear end. So, all right, I've been rambling way too much. Welcome to the inner workings of my head. If you're scared, you should be. If not, why not hit that subscribe button and follow along? I'll catch you in a couple days.